comes to sewing, your machine is your best friend, and it's important to maintain that relationship. I'll show you how to perform regular maintenance on your machine and a few quick repairs that you can do in your home to keep you out of the repair shop, saving money and stitching happily. The first thing you need to know is that it's very, very important that you unplug your machine before performing any sort of maintenance. You do not want to have electricity involved when you are cleaning out your machine. The next step is that you always want to read your manual before proceeding. Your manual will give you tips on how to clean your machine and how to best access the areas of your machine that require cleaning. So, maintenance should be performed on your machine pretty much after every major project that you sew. I tend to do mine just once a month because it's hard to remember to do that in between each project. I'm pretty excited to move on to the next one. When you're going to perform maintenance, you need a few tools. Most of them come with your machine. So you tend to get a little brush with nylon bristles from your machine and a screwdriver that will accompany it. There are some other tools that kind of show up in there, but not all of those are meant to be used by you. It could be used by a repairman. You can also get a universal machine maintenance kit, which has your sewing machine oil that you will need, and I'll go over oiling your machine. A replacement bulb, which is helpful because sometimes the bulbs do burn out on your sewing machines. A vinyl cover, a magnifying glass so that you can see into those tiny recesses, a brush, and a variety of small screwdrivers. I also recommend getting a lens cloth or a piece of muslin so that you can clean the thread path very nicely. Or you also want some Q-tips because there is lubricant inside your machine and sometimes things get a little sticky in there. And a pair of tweezers and steel wool just in case you need to scrub something nicely. Oh, and canned air. So these are pretty much all the tools you'll need to clean your machine. And when it comes time to do so, again, check your manual. If you don't have your manual, for instance, your machine is a second-hand machine or you found it at a thrift store, check online. Many manuals are available to download for free and print out. And if your machine is very old and it's not regularly available online, you can try an auction site such as eBay, and you'll find that someone might be in the opposite position as you are. They have the manual, but they don't have the machine, and they'll sell it to you for not very much money. All right, so we're ready to perform maintenance on our machine. First and foremost, you need to remove your presser foot, and I like to keep a little mug nearby to put that in. And you want to take out the needle. This is so that you don't break the needle as you go, and it's also so that you don't poke yourself while you're performing the maintenance. You'll use your screwdriver to unscrew the screws on your throat plate here. Now I've already removed one, and I have this one just ready to pull out. One bit of advice, if you are trying to put your screwdriver in and it won't quite fit, it's just sort of awkward and it doesn't want to turn the screws in that direction, you can put it at an angle to turn the screws, and that will usually get them loosened up for you to remove them. And your throat plate is going to come right off. There's usually two pieces to it. You can just set those aside. And now we're down inside the bobbin case. You want to remove your bobbin casing and take your nylon brush and just dust it off. And then take your brush and dust inside the machine. And you'll find that a lot of dust does want to come off as you're working. And you can just set that aside, pull it off your brush so that you don't get it down in there further. And the more you pull off, the better. Now, if you're in there and you're digging around, you're trying to find some dust, and you can't quite reach it. Oh, look, there's a good bit of dust. You can use canned air. The important thing to remember when using canned air is that when you blow the canned air into your machine, you don't want to push the dust further into it and into the gears. So you want to angle your machine and the nozzle just right so that when you blow the air in, the dust will come out. And I like to do that outside because that way the dust is not in your house. Okay, so once you've dusted everything off your machine, oh, another tip, when you're dusting along and you find something that's a bit oily and has lint stuck to it, use a Q-tip to just kind of get in there and wipe the lint off the oil, but don't smear the oil around too much because you need that lubricant to keep your machine running nicely. So once you've finished dusting down in the bobbin case area of your machine, take your muslin or your lens cloth, whichever you prefer, and you want to dust the upper thread path. So I just fold mine, and it's sort of like flossing your machine. You're just going to put it in where the thread goes whenever you thread your machine, and sort of rub it along. You want to make sure to get the tension discs. You'd be surprised at how much lint thread can put off as you use it. And just kind of dust anywhere that you have thread on your machine, and get in there, and don't be afraid to kind of push it around. Okay, so now that we've dusted our machine entirely, and that'll help it run wonderfully. You can also use tweezers if you have any large chunks in there. Looks like I've gotten most of my dust out. The next step in maintaining your machine is oiling it. Now, you're going to want to refer to your manual on the best way to oil your machine. The manual will essentially show you all the different spots of lubrication, and it will tell you what type of oil to use. When you're oiling your machine, you don't use WD-40 or just kerosene oil, any random oil out there. You need to use sewing machine oil. Though older machines do take kerosene oil, but I would recommend just using sewing machine oil. It's a clear oil, and a little dab will do you. So the nice thing about your manual is that it will show you all the different spots to place your oil. If your sewing machine manual does not tell you where to oil, that could mean that it's a newer machine that has high-grade synthetic oil in place, and you don't need to oil it. You can take it to a repair shop if you think it needs oiling, but you can void your warranty if you open it up and start putting oil in. So if your machine does not ask you to oil it, you might not need to. Anyways, older machines do require oiling, and you'll just want to place the oil at any points of contact that are referenced in the manual. Oiling your machine does require disassembling it a bit, so I recommend going one section at a time. And as you take parts out, if you're not quite sure how they go back in, you can snap photos with your cell phone. That way you can see exactly how they go back together. Additionally, if you come across a part of your machine that requires a hex screwdriver, that is not an area you should be accessing. That is set aside, that's sort of a warning signal so that the repair people can get into that. Again, that is another way to void your warranty, which is not the best idea. So once you oil, just go ahead and reassemble your machine. And you're going to want to make sure you cover it up before you finish up, because a sewing machine cover will keep all the dust, debris, and animal dander out of your machine, which is very nice. If you have a problem with your machine and it needs repairs, there are 4 areas you can repair on your own that do not require taking it into a repair shop and can save you a little bit of money. The first is check that it's threaded correctly. Often, if you've let your machine sit with the thread in it, it'll slip out of one of the places it needs to be, and so if it's not stitching correctly, that's the problem. If threading it doesn't help, and I do mean thread the upper thread and the lower thread through the bobbin there, if threading your machine doesn't fix the problem, move on to checking the needle. Now your needle generally needs to be replaced every 4 hours of sewing. And that's kind of hard to keep track of. So what I like to do is every time I use my needle, I think about how long it took me to make the project I had just completed. If it was about an hour to an hour and a half, I'll make one mark on the shaft of the needle so that tells me this needle is about 1/4 used up. And then as I proceed on with sewing, I can continue to mark it. And that way, I know exactly when to get rid of this needle. It's possible that the needle is dull, and that's one of the reasons it's not catching the lower thread. Another thing is that your sewing machine needle can accidentally be put in incorrectly. So modern sewing machine needles have a flat side to the shaft and a rounded side. And if you accidentally have the flat side towards the rounded portion or vice versa, it's not going to work properly. Now, if the needle is fine and the thread is correct, check the bobbin. The bobbin case if there's thread on the bobbin that's been wound incorrectly, the bobbin case will catch those threads and it'll become very gummed up in there. So some tips on using your bobbin: always thread your bobbin at the same rate of speed that you intend to sew with. If you're going to go really fast, and of course, go very fast while you're sewing, while you're winding your bobbin. Another thing is you don't want to overfill your bobbin. The nice thing about modern machines is that they do tend to have this bobbin stop here, so that when it becomes exceptionally full, it will stop the bobbin from winding, which is nice, and it'll make that loud kind of gunk 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 sound. Additionally, never use two different threads on the same bobbin. Once you use the first one up, the second one starts spinning out of control down inside the bobbin case, and with that extra tail in there, all the different pieces will accidentally pick it up. Lastly, check your tension. Your tension should be adjusted with each project that you're doing. If you're using a different type of fabric from the last project, which is pretty common, or you have different stabilizers or batting inside, your tension needs to be adjusted. Again, this is another instance where you're going to want to go to your manual. Your manual will give you a variety of demonstrations on what the best way to set your tension at is. In fact, often they'll have graphs showing you this sort of tension requires this. Lastly, a note about rust. If at any point when you're cleaning or maintaining your machine you come across a bit of rust, the first thing is don't panic. You want to inspect it carefully and see if it looks like it's just on the surface or if perhaps it seems like the piece is more corroded. If it's thoroughly corroded, just go ahead and take it right into a machine repair shop. It's possible that the part will need to be replaced or that the repair person can fix it for you. However, if it's just on the surface, you can use a bit of machine oil and some steel wool and just scrub the rust away carefully and make sure you don't get the rust down inside. This will be an instance where you will need to take the pieces of your sewing machine apart.